Hey everybody, Mike Moger, Right Kingdom Real Estate, beautiful, sunny Boulder, Colorado. You know, somebody asked me the other day why I sold real estate for a living. Tough market, tough job, you know, that kind of thing. And I immediately thought of a couple to whom I sold a home many, many years ago. I hadn't thought about them for quite some time. The guy walked into my office. He was a big burly guy, you know, I kind of pictured him working on the docks, that kind of thing, but he was in his 50s, and he said, I want to buy a home. I want to buy a home for my wife. You know, we've been married for over 30 years now, and I'm going to be retired in a few years, and you know, she's been such a good wife. You know, we have 3 boys and a good mom, and you know, she deserves a nice home. And so we would like to retire over here on this side of the water. We live over in Seattle, and you know, we'd like to move over here to the west. I said, okay. Now, you know, your wife is not here right now. Do you want to postpone our meeting and talk about what you guys might want when she's here? He said, oh, no. He said, she doesn't get away from home very often. She's not very comfortable leaving home. So I'll take care of everything here. You know, and so I asked him. I said, are you going to be the decision maker then? And he said, absolutely. You know, I will be the decision in my family, in our family. I'm the decision maker. Absolutely. And in this instance, you know, she'll tell me what to decide. And I thought, did you just hear what you just said? But he was very serious about it. That was the way it was. So I asked him, I said, what do you think your wife would like in a home? He said, you know, what I think she wants is to be able to see a long distance out. You know, we'd like kind of a view of Puget Sound and maybe a view of the Olympic Mountains, whatever. You know, something nice to look at, but so you can see a long way out. Well, that's an interesting way to put that. Well, a couple days later, after our talk, I called him up. I said, you know, I've gone out and I've looked at a number of homes, and I think I've narrowed it down to 5. I think we have some good ones here. He said, could you tell me about them, you know, in great detail? So I took the first one, you know, and I told him all about it, you know, what the yard looked like and what the size of the living room, he said, you know, that doesn't sound like it. Next. Okay. You know, and I told him about the next home, and you know, this and that and whatnot, and a nice big master bedroom. He said, no, that doesn't sound like it either. What's the next one? I was getting a little frustrated. I thought, this guy doesn't work the way most people do. But I told him about it. You know, after talking about it for a few minutes, he said, you know, that one sounds pretty good. He said, we might look at that one. He says, what are the other 2? So I told him about the next one. He said, no, not that one. You know, he says, next. And so I told him about the 5th one. He said, well, that one sounds pretty good. You know, and you can see, so, yeah, well, this and that. And we talked about another 15, 20 minutes. And finally he said, you know, of those 2, he says, this one sounds better. He says, we'll look at this one when we come look at homes. I said, well, you only want to see one home? You know, that's it? He says, yeah, you know, my wife doesn't get out of the house very often. She's not very comfortable leaving home. So we don't want to take up a lot of her time. So we just look at that one. I'm sure that one's going to be very, very nice. That's okay. Kind of puts the pressure on me. Boy, I hope they like this home. So a couple days later, 10 o'clock in the morning, they pull up into the parking lot. And James got out of the car, and he opened the door. And his wife got out, and she held her purse in front of her like this. She was all dressed up in this wonderful dress. Obviously a special occasion. She had on a hat. Looked like she was going to church. And what a wonderful lady. James has told me all about you, Mr. Moger, and that kind of thing. It's just this wonderful, wonderful, very comfortable person. Well, she sat in the front seat of my car because this was her special day. She had left home. She was out to look at a home, you know, that they might be buying. And so she sat in the front seat, and James was in the back seat, and we drove out to the home. And you know, James got out of the car then in the driveway, and he opened the door for the missus, and I got out, and I went up to the lock box, and I opened it up, and I opened the door, and I swung it open, and she walked in. And James was still in the car, and I walked back to James. I said, James, you coming in? You know, door's open. He said, no, this is important for her. She'll tell me if she likes it or not. He didn't even want to see the home. So we walked through the home, and she went from room to room, absolutely silent, holding her little purse in front of her. Finally, we were in the living room. It had cathedral ceiling and had two big picture windows on two different walls. One of them, you could see all the way up Puget Sound from Elliott Bay in downtown Seattle area, all the way north. And if you moved over to the other window and looked out, you would see the Olympic Mountains. And so you could see forever. Beautiful sunny day, Seattle sunny day. And she looked out that one window, and she was looking at Puget Sound. It's just silent. 5 minutes, she turned around and she would just look at the mountains. And she stood there for 4 or 5 minutes, and she went back, and finally I asked her, I said, it's a beautiful, beautiful view, isn't it? And she turned to me, and she had a tear rolling down her cheek, and she said, can James afford this? I mean, can we really afford this home? And I said, James and I talked a lot about money that day, and it's not going to be a problem. If you want this home, you can buy this home. And she turned and she looked up at Puget Sound again. Another 5 minutes went by, and finally she turned around and she said, okay, I'm ready. And she just walked right out the door. That was it. And so she walked out there, and James opened the door for her, and she got in, and absolute silence all the way back to the office. We got out of the car, and James opened the door for her, and they got in their other car. I shook hands with James, she didn't want to shake hands with me, and they drove away. That was it. Next day he called me. He said, we're ready. We want to buy that home. I'll be there this afternoon to sign the papers. And that was it. I tell you this story. You haven't heard the end of it yet. A couple of years later, I was selling real estate in Colorado. I had left Washington State, was in Colorado. And Jim Bryan, owner of the company that I had worked for in Washington, called me up. He says, it's all over the front page. You won't believe this. Those two people that you sold that home to out in Manchester. He says they won the lottery, $5 million. That was fantastic. He said, I called him up, and I asked him if there's anything we can do as far, do they want to, buy more property or anything like that. And the response was immediate and very polite. He said, no, Mike found the right one the first time. We'll never move. That's why I sell real estate. That little lady had a tough time leaving home. Home is not a little thing. It's a big thing. It's a very big thing. And especially someone who stays in her home almost all the time. We had found the right one. We had done well the one time that we went out to look. And she was happy. It wasn't a money thing. She could buy waterfront. She could buy 1,000 feet of waterfront and build a mansion on it. But that isn't what she wanted. She wanted her home, and she was perfectly content there. And that's what it took. And James wanted her to be happy. Again, that's why I sell real estate. When we find the perfect one, that feels very, very good. So if this is the year, come see me. We'll go out. We'll find that perfect home. And, well, who knows? Maybe you'll go out a couple of years later and win the lottery. Enjoy the day. Bye now.